From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes, brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And Wally, it's another episode of 10K Takes Television, and we have a lot to dissect, don't we?
Any good news?
Yeah.
Okay.
The NFL team.
All right.
In the state of Minnesota.
I was going to say, you go down the list of the rest of the teams. We could start with the Wild and go on to Gopher football and then Minnesota United. All those are bad.
Yeah. Minnesota Twins still trying to recover from a September free fall.
I forgot about that. Yeah. I try to not think about baseball these days.
Well, let's start with the positive.
Okay.
Purple Power. They're
Yes.
5-1. The only team with a better record is Philadelphia at 6-0. Then you have the Giants, Buffalo, and Minnesota at 5-1. Is this a mirage, or are you drinking the purple Kool-Aid? Are you starting to think about the Super Bowl out in Glendale, Arizona in February?
Oh, boy, no, I'm not going to go there. But I will say this, and we've kind of gone over this over the last few weeks. They are winning games that they didn't necessarily win a year ago. They have a lot of the same personnel. You got a new head coach, maybe a little different kick in that locker room than you had with Zim. But I think, 5-1. Look, all they got to do is play 500 the rest of the season. They go 10-6.
Yeah.
They're in the postseason at minimum and maybe win the division with a 10-6 record.
They might.
The way that the Packers are going and the Lions and Bears are absolutely they have no chance at all. So I don't know. I think that they're a playoff team. I think the NFC is not as strong as the AFC, obviously. I think your two best teams are in the AFC, with the exception maybe of the Eagles right now. You know, the Chiefs and the Bills are over in the AFC. I don't know. I think they have a chance to make this interesting. Are they a Super Bowl team? Time will tell, but I would say no.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Now, you brought up the new coach, Kevin O'Connell. Mm-hmm. He seems to... His motives and his tactics are coaching with love and hugs and kisses and all this good stuff, propping the guys up. Where Coach Zim, it was fear. It was trying to motivate guys through intimidation and
through the media,
throwing them under the bus and all that. So it's a totally different style of coaching. So far, it's worked for Kevin O'Connell. But I think if you look at any team that has success in an NFL season, or really any sport, you have to have a degree of luck or good timing. Now, they have a lot of talent that's well documented, but you look at when they played New Orleans, minus Jameis Winston,
right,
minus Michael Thomas, minus Alvin Kamara. When they played Miami, minus Tua. Teddy didn't come in until Skylar Thompson got injured, minus a key offensive lineman for the Dolphins. So they've had that knack for winning close games, and they've also played teams at the right time. Tua's coming back this week against Pittsburgh. So that's part of it, though. You need the ball to bounce your way. Look at the double doink in London.
Right. For
New Orleans, that they weren't able to get the game into overtime. So far, these bounces are going Minnesota's way. That's a good sign. You have to have some of that.
And they have gotten big plays on defense late in games. The Patrick Peterson pick comes to mind. The Cam Dantzler steal of the football against the Chicago Bears. I mean, they have gotten some big plays. Now, they are a bend-don't-break defense right now. They've given up yardage, but they have not been giving up tons of points.
But
so let's give the defense credit.
You're right, and look, I'm not going to say these guys are the Purple People Eaters Part 2, but if you go back to the days of Bud Grant, I mean, it was a bend but don't break defense. Between the 20s, the Vikings gave up a lot, but when you got inside the red zone, they were tough to score on. And then they would somehow beat you with a block kick or an interception in the end zone or whatever. So these Vikings are showing some resiliency, and I think that's a big key. Now, they're in their bye week. Next up, Arizona at home. Cardinals are 2-4. Entering week 7. On paper, it looks like a winnable game. But this is going to be a Cardinals team now that has DeAndre Hopkins back, and they acquired Robbie Anderson from Carolina, who's another wideout who can, go down and make splash plays. So Kyler Murray is going to have a couple of weapons against Minnesota that he hasn't had most of this season. So the Vikings, I think, this is going to be a challenge, and they got to defense Kyler Murray.
Exactly, and they did not do well against Jalen Hurts. Let's face it, that against the Eagles, he exposed that Vikings defense. Now, you're going to get a similar type quarterback here in Kyler Murray. And, that scrambling guy that's mobile, you won't get those 6 sacks like you get against Teddy Bridgewater. He's a water bug.
And if you don't contain him and keep him inside the pocket, if he gets outside,
he can hurt you.
And can scramble, because then you have the threat of running and throwing. So that'll be the focus, just trying to make sure Kyler Murray doesn't use his feet along with his arm. Cardinals are, a team that needs to get some wins, so they'll come in, I think, semi-desperate, because in the NFL, every week, as you know, is huge. I think the other thing for the Vikings is Green Bay's scuffling right now.
Boy, that's for sure.
And we don't know what the Packers are going to be like. I think there's this assumption that they'll figure it out and get better. But I think they need to make a trade.
Yeah, well, maybe they will down the stretch here. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, they missed Devontae Adams.
Yes.
And there is just no question about that, and that keeps coming up. But until they start winning football games, it's going to keep coming up, right?
Definitely. And, Robbie Anderson is a guy I'm sure the Packers looked into at least maybe trying to acquire, and the Cardinals got him instead from Carolina. Circling back to Minnesota, I would say moving forward, they need to lean more on Dalvin Cook. He's got to get the rock more. Not just running the ball, but catching the ball.
Yeah.
He's a multi-dimensional back. He only had 1 catch for 6 yards in the win at Miami. They've got to do better in getting him touches.
Yeah, what happened to that? All this talk in the offseason and in the preseason about how they're going to use Dalvin Cook in, a multitude of ways, meaning maybe split him out, get him out in the slot, get him out in space, throw him the football in some bubble screen, something like that. We haven't seen that at all. I mean, they never do that.
No, and I think Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell know that, and I think they probably deep down feel fortunate that they're 5-1 without figuring out yet how to get Dalvin more involved in the offense. I would expect that to change. I mean, it's really not rocket science, right? Especially if they're doubling up Justin Jefferson and trying to take Adam Thielen out of the equation, then run him out into the flats, flip the ball to him in space. Dalvin Cook in space is a nightmare for an opposing tackler.
All right, one other thing I wanted to bring up, and it hasn't figured into a loss yet, but it has figured into making things difficult. Greg Joseph missed another extra point. That's 4 straight games where he has missed an extra point now. Are you concerned?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one thing that hurt Mike Zimmer. I mean, the inconsistency at kicking. We saw it with Blair Walsh and Kai Forbath and whoever else. It was a revolving door. There were so many kickers.
I've heard of a guy that's pretty good. He plays for the Raiders right now.
Daniel
Carlson. Yeah, we cut him after one game in Green Bay. Oh, my goodness.
And, boy, he's been lights out since. The Vikings, they gave him 2 games, and they drafted him. It wasn't like they signed him off the street.
Right, yeah.
That was wasted draft capital. But, I would be concerned about Greg Joseph. No question. You got to figure that out. And let's face it, all the home games are in a dome, and then you have some road games in a dome as well.
You certainly do.
You go to Detroit and places like that. So they can't have those mixed extra points.
Yeah, and the games in Green Bay and in Chicago in the nasty weather are coming because those are in January. Both of them are in January this year. January 1st and January 8th, baby.
So the question is, will that game against Green Bay have any impact? Will the Packers be able to, get back in the mix and make that thing, where the winner wins the NFC North?
We'll see.
They've got to be 1 game out or tied for that to happen.
Yeah, they got a ways to go.
Yeah.
All right. I am told, yes, we need to take a break.
All right. We got a lot coming up. We'll talk about Babe Ruth. That's right, the Bambino visiting Sleepy Eye, Minnesota 100 years ago. All that and more here on 10K Takes Your Purple Ticket.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision. It's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
100 years ago, this past week, a monumental activity, as it were, happened here in the state of Minnesota. And of all places, Sleepy Eye, Minnesota. The great Bambino, Babe Ruth, played one of those barnstorming games that he did back in the early 20s, and he played one in Sleepy Eye. And we got a couple of folks who have been, I guess they're historians, call them what you want, Randy Krisbersick and Scott Superman. They have been following this up with a celebration, and I know you guys dedicated a plaque this past weekend. Randy, tell me about what started all this and what started your interest in this occurrence at Sleepy Eye some 100 years ago now?
Well, I grew up here, and we always heard, about that day. And every once in a while, there's one really well-known picture would show up in the newspaper. Then back in the 30 years ago or so, I was doing some research for the Brown County Historical Society and started to kind of pay more attention to this date, October 16th, 1922. That, wait a second, Babe Ruth was here in our little town. And he also played on the ballpark where my friends and I had played, where Scott played a lot longer and better than I did. And I just started to talk to my friends who were baseball fans, and we decided this kind of deserved some attention. And so we began commemorating it with just sometimes we'd have a bigger deal at the ballpark, and sometimes just a few of us would go out and have a beer, toast the Babe. And this last weekend, of course, was the centennial, so we decided to get the chamber involved and the city and baseball association. We had kind of a big deal down there.
Yeah, and Scott, we know this was an epic event in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, but if you go back 100 years ago, there's no Twins, there's no Vikings, Timberwolves are wild. Maybe you had the University of Minnesota to cheer for. How in the world do you get Babe Ruth, a globally known athlete, to come to Sleepy Eye?
That's a real mystery that we're really not exactly sure how that all took place. We just know that that Babe, when he was growing up, was growing up as a Catholic, and Sleepy Eye is a pretty strong Catholic community in itself, and we have to think that had something to do with it.
Do you have any idea how much the Babe had to be paid to come here, Randy? Is there any clue at all what he was paid? Because the barnstorming tour was for these major leaguers who went out and made some money after the season, and he came to Sleepy Eye, and he didn't come there for free. We know that much.
Oh no. At least it's possible at this point in his career he was making more money off barnstorming than he was with his contract, although he became better paid as time. As I understand it, the two of them received $2,000, and I think it was $1,200 to Babe and $800 to Bob Musial. Bob Musial was his Yankee teammate, and he was also a very good player at the time, although not Babe Ruth. So they were definitely. Now we found a quote here from later in this tour, which was a lot of cold weather, a lot of overnight trains. Said a few weeks later he wasn't sure it was worth it because of how grueling a trip it was. Although he continued to barnstorm, on and off for most of his career, and he did play several times up in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Miller and Nicollet Park, and those parks aren't around anymore. So one of our claim to fame is that the ballpark is still there. You can stand where Babe Ruth stood. We're pretty sure, more or less, maybe a few feet away, and still play baseball.
And Scott, the great ones have a knack for delivering when the spotlight's shining. We know that the Babe legendary tale has it he called his shot at Wrigley Field once in a World Series game. In this appearance in Sleepy Eye, he hits 2 home runs, right?
Yes, he did. He hit 2 home runs. They believe that they were the longest home runs ever hit here in Sleepy Eye.
Of course.
So he was 2 for 3 on the day. Of course, that would have been the case because how many people hit home runs back there anyway? But he did. He was 2 for 3 on the day, and with 2 home runs, and he did strike out once.
Wow. I'd like to be the pitcher known to have struck out the Babe in Sleepy Eye on one of those all-star teams that played with him and against him. That would have been fun to know that you're that guy, right?
Absolutely. Actually, the man's name who struck him out that day was Sock Schuler.
Oh, there we go. See, all over it. So I know that you two not only have looked into the history of this, but you stumbled on a guy who was actually there and caught one of those home run balls. Tell me a little bit about that story and how that all came about. And this was just 6 years ago that you happened upon this. Randy, give me the story behind that.
Well, when I was doing, originally kind of decided this game deserves some attention, I found 4 older men in the 90s, they were old then, that had been at the game, and talked to them, and one by one, of course, they passed away. Then at some point, 2015, I get an email from Joel Youngman up in Cloquet, and Joel, his grandfather was at the game. He caught a ball. One of the home runs. He didn't catch it. It rolled to him. He was an 11-year-old boy playing in the outfield. His grandfather, Len, is in the photo, peeking out from behind Bob Musial, the famous photo of, famous in Sleepy Eye. And come to find out, he's alive. He's 104. Made a connection, went back to see Len and his family 3 more times till he was 106. And he was amazingly sharp. Physically, he declined a little bit in those years. I tell people, watch out when you're 105, it's all downhill. But he still maintained his memory and his laughter. And ironically, we knew he was not doing well in 2018. We were out at the ballpark on kind of late at night, toasting Babe, and Scott got a call that Len had passed away that day, ironically on the day that Babe had been in Sleepy Eye, which is just a weird coincidence. But we became friends with Len, and so it was kind of remarkable to find somebody. Now I'm pretty sure everybody who was at the game is gone. I don't think I'm going to find anybody else.
Well, poetic justice that he passed on that exact same date that the Babe was in Sleepy Eye. Well, guys, we appreciate you coming on the show with us and kind of reliving the moment. And I know that you got a new plaque that went up this past weekend with that celebration. And, hopefully the celebrations will continue for year 101 and beyond. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Back with more here on 10,000 Takes right after this timeout. Stay with us.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
10,000 Takes rolls along. Unlike your Minnesota Gophers, who dropped a couple in a row, one against Purdue, and then they go to Illinois and they lose that football game. Coming into this weekend against Penn State, you have to think that they need to run the table to have a legitimate shot at winning this Western Division of the Big Ten. If they don't win it this year, when are they going to win this thing?
I don't know.
Ever?
You start adding a USC and a UCLA into that thing, and it's going to become even more difficult. And who knows who else is going to come into the Big Ten between now and 2023. Yeah, I think if you're a hardcore Minnesota Gopher fan, you've got to be disillusioned, because just 3 weeks ago, this thing looked pretty good.
Right.
We were all drinking the Kool-Aid after they went into East Lansing and they battered Michigan State. Well, we've since learned that Michigan State isn't all that good. The other 3 wins were cupcakes, right? Those were junk food wins. And then they get exposed by Purdue, and the Boilermakers are better than I think some of us thought, no question. and then Illinois. Brett Bielema now 9-0 against Minnesota, and you got to go into Happy Valley Saturday night with 100,000 fans going gaga, and it's a whiteout. It's national TV on ABC. This doesn't look good. And the Big Ten West is clearly the weaker of the two divisions.
And winnable.
Winnable. It has been winnable the last 2, 3, 4 years. They can't do it. And I don't know when this is going to happen. I was watching the other night USC and Utah in Salt Lake City, and Utah sprung the upset. And Utah's pretty good. And I'm thinking to myself, how can the University of Utah, no disrespect to Utah, they've got a great program right now, but why can Utah win big? And Minnesota still is scuffling.
In what conference did they play in anyway?
They're in the Pac-12.
Oh, they're in the Pac-12.
They were in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State last year. And I saw a report earlier this week, Minnesota has the toughest recruiting task in the Big Ten because they're further away from top-notch talent. Well, do you think there's a lot of top-notch talent in the state of Utah?
No.
There's some.
That's bull.
But there can't be more than Minnesota.
That's bull.
It is.
And it's just the same old story. I mean, how many times have we gone down this path where you think that they're going to turn the corner?
Then they run into a brick wall.
Yeah, exactly. And you get, you lose at home to Purdue in a game where the coach gives up in the last 2 minutes, doesn't even use his timeouts. Let's not forget that now. Let's not sweep that under the rug. And then they throw their playbook out the window and they go over to Illinois and they're passing the ball. They get pass happy on an offense that's predicated on the run. They need to figure this thing out. You've got Mo Ibrahim, arguably one of the best running backs in the nation, and you've got to get him. I understand he had 120 yards last week at Illinois, but you've got to figure out a way to control the clock, because that is how this football team is going to win games. It's not going to be ground and pound. It's not going to be going from that spread formation and throwing it around. That just is not what
they
this
don't
team
have
is.
a quarterback that's not his skill set, Tanner Morgan, and we know that he may not even play based on the injury at Illinois. So yes, I'll throw the gauntlet down. This is a must-win at Penn State.
Oh boy!
And I don't think it's if they want to do big things. If they don't win, they're on their way to the Pinstripe Bowl or something like that. The New York Times already has them in the Pinstripe Bowl. I saw that a few days ago.
Oh, boy, here we go.
Yankee Stadium, where your Guardians season came to a close this week.
Don't remind me. That's terrible. Can the Pinstripe Bowl, can they host hockey games? Can your Minnesota Wild get into a Pinstripe Bowl? Man, they got off to a rocky start. Holy Toledo. Yeah, wow. I mean, 3 games, they give up 20 goals in their first 3 games. How do you expect to win hockey games giving up that many goals?
You can't. It's that simple.
Ridiculous.
You can't expect your offense to deliver 8 goals or 7 goals on a nightly basis. I am calling the Wild end of the ice the red light district, because that red light's going on constantly, whether it's Philippe Gustafson or Marc-Andre Fleury. They have a goalie problem. Now, look, the other night, Dean Evison, after the loss to Colorado, the Stanley Cup champs, said, this is on the goalie, this is on the defenseman, this is on the offense, this is on the coaches, it's on everybody. He was trying to deflect it. Mm-hmm. But we all know Marc-Andre Fleury that's here now is not the Hall of Fame Marc-Andre Fleury that carved his niche with Vegas and Pittsburgh.
No. Why do you think they let him go?
Exactly. Well, he didn't do much for Chicago.
No, he didn't do much there either. Yeah. And are they regretting letting Cam Talbot go?
I think at this point, yes.
I think so.
He made the All-Star team a year ago. Now, he had some flaws. We saw him get peppered on New Year's Day in the Winter Classic at Target Field against St. Louis when it was 10 degrees below zero, the frozen night that we spent there at that ballpark. But I still think that's an upgrade over what they have.
Yeah, well, I mean, he played well at times. Like, he actually played pretty well down the stretch last year, and then they didn't use him in the postseason.
Right, he probably should have got the call in the playoffs a game earlier than he did.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we need to take a break because we are going to do Takes of the Day coming up next. This is 10,000 Takes, your wild ticket.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
10K Takes on television, getting ready to wrap up another program. But before we go, we'll have Takes of the Day. That's coming up shortly. But time to talk a little baseball. As the playoffs roll on, we're now into the NLCS and the ALCS, minus your team, Cleveland, minus my team, the LA Dodgers. What are you going to do? Who are you cheering for now?
I can't. No, I really don't care anymore. Well, at least my squad outlasted your squad.
Yeah, you did.
And about $200 million less on their payroll, too. Man, how do you win 111 games like the Dodgers did and just get dumped in the first round?
I, along with every other Dodger fan, and I'm sure the players and coaches are singing the Dodger blues. Yeah. I mean, it's really unprecedented. That was a colossal, I say collapse, but I want to give San Diego credit, too, for outplaying the Dodgers, winning in 4 games, not even 5. The Dodgers couldn't even go the distance. But, yes, how do you have that kind of a regular season and then crater in the postseason? The Dodgers, there's not much winter out there in SoCal. It's usually 75 degrees and sunny, but it's going to be colder than normal out there as they try to process through this.
Yeah, well, short series, things happen.
Yes.
And Cleveland had New York on the ropes. They had them down 2-1. They lost Game 4. Then the rain, which, of course, we've seen this for Cleveland before when the rain shut them down against the Cubs in the World Series in 2016. And then it was all Yankees in Game 5. So Yankees, unfortunately for Cleveland fans, move on. And you know, as much as we bang on Rocco and both managers, Dave Roberts and Tito Francona, getting their share of criticism for how they handled things, particularly for Tito in Game 5 and not pitching Shane Bieber or one of his other pitchers, and for Dave Robertson just getting eliminated so quickly.
Yeah, and maybe over-reliance on the bullpen at times, and he's a lightning rod right now. I mean, but he's had, they've had a 10-year run that's similar to what the Atlanta Braves had in the 90s that only resulted in 1 World Series title for that Bobby Cox group. So a lot of winning, but only 1 championship, and you always call it a bubble title in the World Series in Arlington. So
it's a fake title.
Yeah.
All right, takes of the day, huh?
Yeah, we're going to plug in the mood meter, see if you're an angry American, a cranky Yankee, a grumpy Guardian. Oh, maybe you're a happy camper. That's rare, but who knows?
Well, this past Monday night, we found out that Minnesota United is just like all the rest of Minnesota's teams. We saw it 2 years ago when they cratered, as you like to say, in the MLS semifinals and the Western Conference Finals. They had a 2-0 lead late in the match, lost to Seattle. Well, they were playing FC Dallas down in good old Frisco, Texas this past Monday night. And they were tied at 1, so they went into extra time, and then they went into penalty kicks, and then they're out of the playoffs. So welcome to the club, Minu. You're just like the Vikings and the Twins and the Wild and the Timberwolves and the Gophers and everybody else that we cheer for in this great state. You're out.
Yes, indeed, and the mood meter says you are a grumpy Guardian, just as I suspected.
Just can't get over the hump, just like the rest of them.
It's a dog chasing its tail when it comes to Minnesota sports teams. Well, my take of the day, I'm going to give some condolences to the city of Nashville, Music City.
Oh, boy.
They're all geeked up now. They've got approval for a $2.1 billion dome. Construction will start in 2023. They think this is the greatest thing to hit Tennessee since the Grand Ole Opry. Well, let me tell you, folks, no. A dome? Oh, please. You've gone down the same road as Minneapolis, Inglewood, Detroit, New Orleans. I mean, it's soon Arlington Heights, Illinois. Mm-hmm. It's going to be Groundhog Game, Titan fans. You're going to go in that venue every week, and nothing's going to change. And oh, by the way, I thought the weather in Nashville was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, just like L.A. They did it in L.A. Why not in Nashville?
And they won a Super Bowl and a Final Four and all that good stuff. Oh, boy. Music City, too bad. All right, let's FedEx out some thank yous. One goes to Alex Yambrick, David Weld, Rocky, of course, Randy and Scott in Sleepy Eye. For Wally, I'm Eric saying so long. This is 10K Takes, your sports ticket.